Hello, my name is Coley Samuelin, and today for my lesson on disabilities, I've chosen to primarily focus on emotional disturbance. Emotional disturbance is one of the more ambiguous disabilities, and so we're really going to dive into what is qualified as an emotional disturbance, who it affects, how to deal with it, where we might see it, when it occurs, and why or the causes of it. To start off, an emotional disturbance, as defined by IDEA, is an inability to learn that cannot be explained by intellectual, sensory, or health factors. Meaning, when you get into depression and anxiety, there's not really a concrete reason why the child is held back in school or why they're struggling. They don't have an actual diagnosed illness at the time. Also, an inability to build or maintain relationships. So this begins to show up within the school years, that the kid isn't just antisocial, but actually really struggles to make relationships at all. Third, inappropriate types of behavior or feelings under normal circumstances. So what may be okay for a normal or typical student, with a student that has an emotional disturbance, it could make them cry, act out, etc. Number 4, a general pervasive mood of unhappiness or depression. So instead of this child's natural resting state to be pleasant, happy, their resting state is actually depressed and unhappy, and not always for a particular reason. And lastly, the tendency to develop symptoms or fears with personal school problems. So we're not just talking the typical worry, we're talking major anxiety. And notice the asterisk at the top. One or more of the following over an extended period of time that affects educational performance. So if a child has depressed moods or sometimes acts out in class, that does not necessarily mean that they have an emotional disturbance. Now, what an extended period of time means, we're not exactly sure what the time frame is, but it needs to be something that doesn't just happen every now and then. So again, what is not an emotional disturbance is a child that is merely going through a hard time, something that's just a phase, or that's an understandable depression. Let's say maybe the child has the death of a loved one and they struggle for a few weeks to a month, but then they pull out of it. That would not technically be a long-term emotional disturbance. Also, children who are antisocial or just shy does not mean that they have an emotional disturbance. Students who experience sad days and students who have a hard time focusing. There are multiple categories of emotional disturbances, and a few of them are anxiety disorders, bipolar disorders, conduct disorders, eating disorders, obsessive-compulsive disorder, and psychotic disorder. Most of those you're probably pretty familiar with. One that I was unfamiliar with was the conduct disorder, and that's basically a child's inability to follow rules. Sometimes they're cruel with animals, people, figures, just not really able to follow procedures as other children might be able to. And then again, with obsessive-compulsive disorder, that shows up a lot in the way they are very orderly and needing to repeat certain behaviors until they get it right. Next is this quote by the National Alliance from Southern Arizona. Mental illnesses are medical conditions that disrupt a person's thinking, feeling, mood, ability to relate to others, and daily functioning. And I think that's important to note, that it's not something that's just they're sad every now and then. It's a daily struggle. Just as diabetes is a disorder of the pancreas, mental illnesses are medical conditions that often result in the diminished capacity for coping with the ordinary demands of life. So hopefully now we're getting a picture of what it looks like. A child that is disturbed emotionally 9 times out of 10, that it's not just an uncommon thing, it's a daily struggle. So now, what are the symptoms? There's many. Here's a picture that depicts just a few of them. A child behaving in an antisocial manner, being more immature than the rest, crying very easily, getting offended, reactive, hyperactivity, a lot of temper tantrums, getting irritated, and just an overall unhappy and depressed state. Here they are spelled out a little bit more and a little bit more detail. Self-injurious behavior is another symptom that you might see with a child that has an emotional disturbance. Distorted thinking, kind of a fogged view of reality, learning difficulties, inability to focus on the subject matter because of their emotions. Also, mood swings, major anxiety, etc. Now, the causes aren't really spelled out, but most can be attributed to these right here. A lot of times, emotional disturbances can be attributed to genetics and seeing patterns within heredity. Also, brain impairment, they've found that there are certain areas of the brain that don't fire or release hormones in the way that they should. Health and wellness, how you are eating and exercising will greatly affect your school life, and so children that are in homes that do not have access to a healthy diet and exercise schedule sometimes struggle with emotional disturbance, as well as stress, family life, other traumatic experiences. I know from my personal experience, I had a neighbor that experienced her parents being held hostage at age 15 and witnessed it, and ever since then she was not able to function in school as she used to because of those emotional issues. Who is affected by this? You can see this graph here depicts the age of students that are affected by emotional disturbance, and it looks like it just begins to climax more and more and more until about age 16, and then begins to sharply decline. And the IDEA website pointed out this statistic that 17.1 million children out of the 74.5 million struggle with emotional disturbance. How can we help? Well, there are many ways as teachers. The first thing is to assess the student, and if they qualify for an IEP, once that plan has been put into action, there is counseling provided that's paid for, and a lot of times it's encouraged to also have family therapy, or if that either can't be scheduled or there are financial reasons that the family just really needs to support. Talk with the student, learn more about their disability, keep in contact with parents, and lastly, this video is a great example of a teacher that helps a student. This teacher shows a great example of being persistent and helpful even when her student is struggling. Here are the sources that I used, and if you have additional questions, feel free to watch the YouTube video and check out these sites. Thank you.